Okay, so today we're tackling a huge question, one that seems kind of obvious on the surface, but trust me, the real story is full of twists and turns. We're asking, how did the United States become the world's undisputed superpower? I mean, it's a reality we all just live with, right? You see it everywhere, from Hollywood films to the fact that the US dollar is the currency of global trade. We're talking about the richest, most powerful country in history, with a military that's second to none and, yeah, even the most Olympic medals. But here's the kicker. This was never supposed to happen. It was never a sure thing. For most of human history, the idea of America as the global leader would have sounded absolutely crazy. So, how on earth did a bunch of overlooked colonies pull it off? What's really wild is just how fast this all happened. Look at this. For like 2,000 years, the world's economic giants were India and China. The US is barely a blip on the radar until the late 1800s. And then, boom. Its explosion to the top happens in just over a single century. That's lightning fast in the grand scheme of history, an incredibly rapid rise to power. So our story starts with a really surprising fact. For a long, long time, the very continent that would become a superpower, well, it was seen as little more than a consolation prize. Yeah, you heard that right. When European explorers first crossed the Atlantic, the real prize, the jackpot, was in the south. You had Spain and Portugal conquering the incredibly wealthy Aztec and Inca empires, finding mountains of gold and silver. North America? By comparison, it seemed kinda empty. An early expedition found no precious metals, so for more than 100 years, the continent was basically ignored. So what changed? What was the spark? Well, it wasn't about finding gold. It was about creating an idea. A handful of colonies on the East Coast decided to try something totally radical, building their own country from the ground up. So, after the colonies helped Britain win a major war against France in America, London found itself with massive debts. And how do you pay for a war? Well, you tax people. They started heavily taxing the colonists, who were furious. Their whole argument was, hey, no taxation without representation. From there, things just escalated, from protests to violence, and finally to a full-blown revolution. But winning the war, that was only half the battle. The new nation's first shot at a government was, to put it mildly, a mess. It had no power to tax, and the 13 states were basically acting like squabbling little countries. The real game changer was the U.S. Constitution. It created a strong, unified federal government, and that became the bedrock for everything that came next. Okay, so with a stable government in place, America began to grow. And when I say grow, I mean really grow. We're talking a massive continental scale expansion. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson pulled off what might just be the greatest real estate deal in all of history. For just $15 million, he bought the entire Louisiana Territory from Napoleon France. See, Napoleon needed cash for his wars in Europe. And just like that, with the stroke of a pen, the United States literally doubled in size, overnight. And the expansion was far from over. Fast forward 45 years, and that exact same number, $15 million, pops up again. This time, it's a payment made after the U.S. defeated Mexico in a war. In doing so, it seized a huge territory that included modern-day California and gave the nation its coveted coastline on the Pacific Ocean. This pretty much sums up the popular idea at the time, which was called manifest destiny, this belief that the U.S. was basically destined to expand all the way across the continent. But we have to be clear, this expansion came at a brutal, terrible cost for the Native American tribes who were forcibly driven from their ancestral lands. So by the early 1900s, America is this big, resource-rich nation. But the event that would truly catapult it to global superpower status wasn't something it started. Instead, it was the absolute devastation that happened to everybody else. The two world wars just shattered the traditional great powers of Europe and Asia. Their cities were left in ruins, their economies completely destroyed. But for the United States, safely protected by two massive oceans, the wars were, weirdly enough, an economic miracle. Its factories were running full tilt, supplying the Allies. And in the process, it went from being a nation in debt to being the world's main banker. And this right here is a pivotal moment. Pay attention to this. Towards the end of World War II, the Allied nations get together to figure out how to stabilize the global economy. And they make a crucial decision. They agree to peg their own currencies to the US dollar. This effectively makes the dollar the foundation of all international finance. It gave America an immense economic power that it frankly still holds today. So, with its economic power totally cemented, the US didn't just show up to the post war party. It designed the whole house. It actively created a new world order. The US stepped up and took the lead in creating the key institutions that would run this new global system. We're talking about the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, and the NATO military alliance. All of these were designed to promote a system of global cooperation and trade, with, you guessed it, America sitting right at the center of it all. At the very same time, its military presence just exploded across the globe. Get this, today the US maintains more than 800 military bases in countries all around the world. Now, this huge global footprint is largely a leftover from the Cold War. As the US and the Soviet Union were locked in this global chess match for influence, America set up bases and alliances all over the planet to contain communism. In the process, it sort of became the world's policeman. So, let's recap. America's incredible rise was fueled by a lucky location, a stable government, massive expansion, and the fortunes of war. But here's the thing. Being number one comes with its own very unique set of problems. Despite being the wealthiest nation on Earth, the US is also one of the most unequal developed countries out there. The top 1%, just the 1% of the population holds nearly half of the entire country's wealth. That is an enormous gap, and it creates some really deep social and political divisions. And that brings us to our final thought for today. The United States achieved this unbelievable level of global power. But back home, it's facing huge challenges, from sky-high healthcare costs to deep social inequality. And it raises a really fundamental question. What is the true cost of being a superpower? And is it always worth the price?